There's two aspects to property that I've learnt over time. There's price and there's time. And both of them in a deal, in a project, are just as valuable as the other. Bring back some sort of discount for off the plan for people taking the risk of it not being exactly what they'd hoped, and get rid of this foreign surcharge for investors from overseas or buyers from overseas. Everything's an oversized 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom space for the grandkids. Yes, there's a market for that, and as there should be, but there's also a need for supply of places to live. The top end's just getting stronger and stronger, really at the expense of a lot of other people in the country. These buildings employed thousands of people, not only in the property industry, architects, town planners, engineers, but actual people that really matter to society.
So I'm here with Mark Wizel from Wizel Property Group. Great to see you, mate.
What's up, Mike?
So you're a bit of a legend in the property market. Most people that work in the development sector know you and often have done some kind of business with you in their career. But for those that are kind of learning about you for the first time, do you want to give us the couple of minute overview on your track record and what you're up to now?
It's great to be here with you, and really admired what you and the team have created over the last few years and the impact and cut through you're having into the sector. Arguably at the most difficult time from what I've seen in my career for the development sector anyway. So all power to you, and hopefully some of the tailwinds start to head in your direction in the near future.
Cheers, mate.
I've pretty much just done property. I 14, worked in a fish and chip shop, migrated to the Victoria market by the age of 17, where we had a family business selling sheepskin products. Invaluable lessons about how to deal with people from overseas, tourists, etc. And most importantly, learn at a young age how to deal with rejection, which then really helped later on in working in real estate, which is something you're dealing with all the time. People saying, no, I don't want to buy it, or no, I don't want you to sell it. So that certainly helped. But yeah, 21 years old, sort of thought sitting there at the back of the Capitol Theatre at RMIT, maybe this isn't for me, the valuations degree. So decided to go out and try and get a job in property. Dad sort of thought it would be better if I did commercial property as opposed to residential, because he worked on the weekends at the market and felt that he lost a lot of time with his family by being away on weekends.
Yeah.
So he steered me into commercial. Thankfully, Pat Burke, who's a good estate agent practicing today, was working at Collies at the time, needed a hand in the strata office market. And that was my welcome and entree to Melbourne commercial property. It's going back nearly 20 years now, which is crazy to think, and ended up moving to CBRE about 18 months after starting at Colliers. Moved over with a gentleman by the name of Martin O'Sullivan, who was a really well-regarded estate agent at the time. And then the incredible journey of CBRE began. And it's certainly something that I still hold very dear to my heart today. And away from my marriage to Teresa and our 2 young boys, Harold and Harvard, it's quite easily the most important thing that I've been involved in my life, the people we met, what we achieved as a group, the success, the learnings. And it's great to see a lot of that carried out in the industry today through the team at CBRE and other agency groups out there.
When I first moved to Australia, it was probably when you were talking about the time at CBRE in terms of when the Asian markets first kind of really opened up to Australia. Do you want to just share a bit about what was that experience like when the capital market started flowing this way, and what did you learn through that process?
Yeah, it's really fascinating to sort of look back now, because obviously that market's really dried up quite significantly. So it's given everyone an opportunity to probably reflect and think about, well, what was that? How did it happen? Why did it end? Arguably, we probably should have placed a bit more value on it when it was happening, because it's a real missing piece of the development market at present, either through active capital developing sites or the way in which developers are struggling to get pre-sales to obtain finance, which used to come from a high percentage of selling off the plan to Asian investors.
Yeah.
So those two things were inherently linked. You had Asian developers, Asian heritage developers coming here doing projects that gave mum and dad investors back in their countries confidence to buy apartments within the projects. So it was really quite intuitive the way it worked. And at present, both are kind of struggling, which is a pity. How it happened, I was arguably a little bit fortunate, because I'd had exposure at a very, very young age at the Victoria market to dealing with Chinese people.
Yeah.
Because my dad's stall was catered towards selling products to Chinese tourists,
right,
to take back home as gifts for their family. So as a young European Western kind of Gardenvale Primary, young kid, I guess, I'd been brought up with this exposure to Asian people, and in particular Chinese people. And what a lot of people didn't quite grasp when we fast forward to the days of CBRE was the differences between a mainland Chinese person and a Singaporean and someone from Hong Kong and someone from Malaysia are vast.
Yeah.
Even to the point where the difference between some people from China's north versus China's south are very different culturally, how you deal with them, how you negotiate with them. So for me, it felt like all the way through the run of the Asian investment, I just had a head start. And with my ability to innovate and create and the energy that I brought, I can see why I was always able to kind of stay one step ahead. So the way in which I was first exposed to Chinese investment was quite uncanny. I was annoying a gentleman by the name of Sam Alter, who owned and owns a lot of significant retail property.
Yeah.
And my job at CBRE was to sell retail property. So I kept ringing him saying, Sam, can I sell this? Sam, can I sell that? Needless to say, these were assets that would never be sold, but I was enthusiastic and having a go. And one day Sam rang back and he said, look, I'm never going to sell any of my retail assets, but I've got control of this property in Melbourne, which is the Stonington Mansion site. And he had some financial involvement. He said, I'm happy for you to sell that for me. Anyway, so I put it up for sale, went through all the processes, and before I knew it, my mobile phone was ringing hot with people that couldn't speak English. This is 2008, 2009. We're at Rialto. I'm probably 23, 24, something like that. I've got no idea what I'm doing. Anyway, I sort of, how am I going to speak to these people?
So, and where do you think they got your phone number from at the time?
From the marketing, I would imagine. You know, marketing, signboards, internet, however it was. So I was like, I can't service these people. So I literally walked around Rialto, and it sounds a bit crass, but I was looking for someone who I thought could speak Chinese. And over in the corner, I'll never forget it, was Lewis Tong. And I walked over to Lewis and said, hi, mate, my name's Mark Wizel. I'm in the sales team. Could you speak to these people? Anyway, cut a long story short, a week later, Lewis said, very timidly, as he was back then, he still is pretty timid and special guy. He said, they'd like a contract. Could you get me a contract? So I got him the contracts, didn't think anything of it. You know, so a week later, he comes back, signed contracts, $28 million.
Whew.
I thought, whoa, what's happening there? Anyway, I then proceeded to go and convince his parents that he should join the sales team. They were a bit apprehensive because...
What was he doing at the time?
Valuations, yeah. And then to think we'd go on to sell probably $12 or $13 billion worth of commercial property together to Asian capital. And now obviously business partners in everything we're doing at Wizel and Pearl River Group and Advise Transact. They're all entities that we own together. Yeah. But it's been an incredible journey, both best men at each other's wedding. And sometimes I think back, what if I didn't stand up and go and look for the Chinese speaking person? But they were incredible days. There were significant drivers. Mainly, Mike, to summarize, I would say that it was the deployment of Chinese capital at all levels of the capital stack. Right. As in from developers to large banks to institutions, right through to a Chinese couple from Shanghai wanting to buy an apartment in the CBD that their child might use one day when they come to Australia for university. There was pressure from all of those types of buyers, and then that had a widespread impact on Southeast Asia. So, for example, groups like UEM and Setia and Mammoth Group, and the list just goes on and on and on of these groups that came here, they thought, well, instead of just selling product in our hometown to mainland Chinese, we can do developments in Australia and sell also to mainland Chinese who are already on our database. Yeah. So you had projects that would be offered for launch, 400 or 500 apartments, and it wouldn't be unnatural to hear on Monday that Colliers or CBRE residential sales had sold 200 or 300 apartments in a day.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Like in the time now as well. It's, geez, bring those times back.
Well, it won't be as easy as that, unfortunately. I agree. The damage that's been done You can bring in new taxes and people understand that. But if I think back to 2017 when they implemented the surcharge for foreign buyers no consultation, no discussion with the market, just literally overnight implemented. Well, I'm not sure. Don't get me wrong. I love Melbourne. I'm a fanatical Australian. Go Sam Kerr with the Socceroos and Matildas. But I'm not sure that we're so good and so special that we can just automatically charge 12 or 13% as a privilege tax to have the privilege of owning something in here when you're competing with other global cities, whether it's London or Vancouver or somewhere in America.
Yeah, I think especially in that 2008, 2009, obviously the world was going through a financial crisis at the time. And we had you speak at a panel a couple of months back, and you were saying that, from your perspective, that they were one of the keys really that stopped us going into recession. I totally agree. We're kind of not that insulated, but we were fortunate at the time to be adjacent to Asia and then have the luck really of being able to kind of attract that capital at the time and do a good job of it. But it feels certainly that the element of luck has almost been forgotten, and the kind of service and whatnot that we need to kind of enable that capital to come back across the full capital stack, as you said, seems to be long forgotten, and we need it back.
Well, they're big projects.
Yeah.
If you take a 50-level building on Elizabeth Street or a Beckett Street or Latrobe Street in the CBD, and all you got to do is look at the skyline now and see how many projects were done in that decade period. They're large projects. They require a lot of money. They require a lot of equity. They require a lot of debt. And you need big companies to deliver those projects. But although I was just looking at it at the time as well, I've got to list this development side and make sure my competitor doesn't get it. And then the Collier's agents or CBRE residential agents coming, they're just looking at it. I've got to sell these apartments, right? So we're all looking at it through our own lens. But what was never lost on me, Mike, was that within these buildings, as they're going up, are thousands of people working.
Yeah.
Sparkies, plumbers, chippies, lift people, fire people. I mean, these buildings employed during that difficult period for Australia, these buildings employed thousands of people, not only in the property industry, architects, town planners, engineers, but actual people that really matter to society, the contributions that they make to society, their families. The Asian developers, whether people like it, don't like it, what they can't do is disagree. Without their capital, our industry would have been in a hell of a lot of trouble during those years.
We're mid-April 2024 right now, and in the AFR today, I was reading, there's this change where they're looking at actually pulling right back on allowing students to come into the market. And some people complain about negative feelings about the large towers in South Bank and the apartments too small and the like. But really, that product has been designed to accommodate the student market. And when I reflect on the taxes and things that have been introduced back in 2017. If those taxes weren't applied back then, would we have to be now stemming the flow of immigration into the country, which, as you say, it doesn't just benefit the construction and development industry, but also the education market and all the services that wrap around that. And I guess it's just a bit of a tragedy, really, that we're having to now pump the brakes, which potentially is the right thing to do given the kind of supply issues that we have. But we wouldn't have had to face that had it not been for seemingly short-sighted taxation at the time.
Yeah, look, it's not an easy world to navigate at the moment. There are still some lingering effects of what we went through during COVID. I think it would be irresponsible to think that that's not occurring, and you see them washing through in all different ways now, and the impacts that it's having on society, and quite scary, especially what's happening with domestic violence and how that's really reared its head again. I think that if you analysed it, there'd be links back to the impacts of COVID, whether it's job loss, loss of confidence, people getting into bad habits, whatever it might be. So it's a difficult world to navigate. There does seem to be a lot of retrospective decision-making and policy-making, and I think that frustrates the industry. I think the Property Council, for example, gets quite frustrated off the back of that as well. And I think the other thing that maybe we just need to be a bit cautious of is, and it's not the fault of society, and I'm not a very intelligent person, but we had a lot of continued economic growth. We didn't really have much hardship in this country, and I think what can happen when we go through that is you can become quite self-righteous.
Yeah.
And you can stop thinking about what really matters. And your comment before that external opinion about the size of apartments or what other people should live in, I think that we should look at managing our own backyard again, manage our own affairs, manage our own family, manage our own home. And if people do want to live how they want to live, it's really up to them. It's not for us to come in and say that that apartment bedroom's too small or that basin's too small, or what will we be telling them next, that they shouldn't be using a certain type of cutlery. And I think that that's really, you can see that throughout society in a lot of ways at the moment. And I think it's dangerous. It takes your eye off the ball and ultimately makes you uncompetitive.
We spoke a bit about this at the start, just in terms of we are in a tough part of the market cycle in general. We talk to a lot of developers as well, and there'll be plenty listening to this. So what are you saying to developers right now when they're coming to you asking whether it's about when's the market going to turn, what should they do with sites? I know it's a pretty general question, but what's your advice to the market at the moment?
You really think that the market's on the verge of exploding in some sort of way?
Yeah. It seems like that. When we look at our data, that's kind of what it seems to be showing. But I think we kind of need the established market to go first. This is on the resi side.
Yeah.
But it feels like we're not far away.
So you sort of think, well, there's two aspects to property that I've learnt over time. There's price and there's time. And both of them in a deal, in a project, are just as valuable as the other. So some of the advice that I've been talking probably more with my mates, like now that I've moved away from agency, I'm not ringing people or talking to people to sell them something as such. So you can sort of have a lot more open discussions. And I think because I worked pretty hard, although I was difficult to deal with because I was very focused on getting the best outcome for the vendor, which annoyed a few developers at times, I think that in the end, they've respected it. So now you can just pick up the phone, like I might pick up the phone to Tim Gurner or Shane Wilkinson, these sort of people that I've built friendships with over time, and say, hey, mate, I was just thinking if I was in your shoes, this is what I would do.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the big one at the moment is obviously trying to secure things on longer settlement terms, because basically you're trying to preempt or time when the moons are going to align for pre-sales to occur and it's as simple as it won't happen, but should the government, Victoria, come and say, well, we'll go back to a 10% discount for off the plan. Now, accountants watching, smarter people than me watching will have better terminology, but let's just keep it simple. So 10% discount for off the plan buyers, right? That would have an impact literally overnight in the pre-sale market.
Yeah, I think the risk profile that the government thinks that consumers should be taking in order to get the supply efficiently to market is unrealistic.
I always wonder if the decision makers, and this isn't a matter of bashing up the government whatsoever, and they probably couldn't care less what I say anyway, which is okay. But I always think, well, if a relative came to that person and said, what would you do? I wonder if they'd say, no, you should wait and see the finished product because it's going to be safer to do that. So if that is the case, then why should it be different for anybody else? But the two things that would get the market moving really quickly, bring back some sort of discount for off the plan for people taking the risk of it not being exactly what they'd hoped.
Yeah.
And get rid of this foreign surcharge for investors from overseas or buyers from overseas. I mean, I would love to see the statistics, but I think the market has well and truly spoken. I can't think of a project in the last couple of years above 300 apartments that's gotten off the ground.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I might be wrong. I mean, there might be some, but we're going from 15 being delivered a year to I can't think of one.
Yeah, that's right.
And if I hear this talk about downsizers anymore, everything's for a downsizer. Everything's an oversized 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom space for the grandkids. Yes, there's a market for that, and as there should be. But there's also a need for supply of places to live, just places to live. We've got a big CBD that's got incredible amenity, shopping centres like Melbourne Central, train stations, universities, fill the place.
The thing I find confusing with this whole thing is that the rhetoric around, we don't want to have people from overseas, from anywhere from Asia owning the properties, and that's why we need the tax. But then in the next breath, they're saying that, but institutional capital coming from overseas and owning build-to-rent developments is different. I'm like, why is that different? And to me, the consolidation of ownership of housing in Australia is a negative thing from my personal point of view. I think having it fragmented where my preference would be to see that people that live in Australia have the opportunity to own the place that they live. Failing that, I think at least having the ownership fragmented, so property can change hands from an overseas buyer owning one property as opposed to an institutional buyer owning an entire building. I don't think that's an overly healthy thing for the Australian economy. And I think it's just such a set of double standards as far as the way that the government's approaching the taxation.
Sometimes it takes a situation where you back in a certain theme or a certain thematic, and then you get an opportunity to reflect and review, and you just hope that that does occur and there's a more balanced view and more balanced support towards the wider industry. Just like there was a market for house and land, there was a market for inner city apartments. Just like there's a market for downsizers, there is a market for build to rent, but that shouldn't come at the expense of the traditional build to sell. Even if you talk about, every time I hear BTS, I kind of cringe because I kind of feel like, why have we made something that is complicated and it was never needed? My views, and I think I really do believe that build to rent is going to be a big success in this country. And
I think it's going to end up being 12 to 15% of the stock. Probably. I guess my issue is not so much with the build to rent category as a whole as it is the kind of double standards that are applied in relation
either
to
or.
It's like if we're going to treat them, in my view, it should be treated the same. If it's foreign capital owning property in Australia, one can't be effectively getting a tax incentive and the other one receive like an additional tax. It should be the same from my perspective.
It's always a lot easier when you're an industry participant to understand the specifics of what has occurred and what drives the decision making. So I feel a bit not sorry, but sometimes governments are not in the intricate detail. So if you want my view on why the surcharge occurred, there was a connotation out there that non-Asian Australians were going to auctions of established homes in suburbs like Burwood, Vermont, Mitcham, etc., and they were not being able to compete. So the Asian heritage people, whether they were born here, migrated here, somehow were getting monies from overseas and buying here, they were going to auctions and they were losing out. So it was becoming a political item.
You mean in the established market or in the new market?
In the established market.
See,
that's exactly right. So then there was an overcorrection. So they thought the market was out of control.
And to be honest, if that was the case, I kind of get that. Perspective is that for people that have and the Asian bit I think is wrong, but I think it's in general, if people have grown up here, they should have an opportunity if they're just getting absolutely smoked by people at auction for established housing. I understand the realignment of having new people to the country should start by buying new property and help to unlock more supply to the marketplace. But I think you're about to say it's the overswing of the pendulum.
Well, interestingly, now that I think about it, there's been a lot of focus on infrastructure in Victoria. It's very topical at the moment, the project delays, how big the projects are. I wonder whether we would have had enough construction workers to deliver the government's infrastructure projects over the past 6 years and at the same time continue to build the big towers in town. Haven't thought about that before, but that might be a little bit of a conspiracy theory there for you.
Nothing like a conspiracy theory to drive the clicks, my friend. And so we spoke a bit before about the downsizer, large apartments, etc. What we're seeing at the moment in our data is that it's the affordability is like the main story as far as conversion through to sale at the moment. That's kind of a pretty consistent theme across the national market. Sure. How do you see that playing out? And do you think we're going to continue to see affordability being the main theme? Or do you think there's going to be increased demand for different price ranges over time and what goes next?
Look, unfortunately, it just feels that the top end's just getting stronger and stronger, really at the expense of a lot of other people in the country. And I think that's very dangerous. I think that leads to people becoming very frustrated over time, and I've got no problem making money and the people doing well, but I don't think it should necessarily come at the cost of other people not being able to provide for basic necessities.
I agree.
Whether it's housing, utilities, food, etc. So I think affordability will continue to be a major issue because of a lot of the other pressures in terms of cost of living that people are experiencing. I don't think that real wages, as in I don't think the performance of businesses are actually supporting real wage growth at the moment. Maybe wage growth is happening because it has to happen. There's a shortage of labour, so people have to pay more to either retain their people or attract, people. But I'm not sure that the wage increase are coming off better fundamentals. But you can see the big are getting bigger. whether it's the big supermarkets, whether there's less people that are doing better.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not sure if that is, a true depiction of the Australia that I certainly grew up with, which was have a go and sacrifice and you might get ahead one day. It's very difficult for people to even start contemplating what have a go looks like.
I think that's right. Yeah.
And in Victoria, unfortunately, it's even further amplified. The amount of people I'm talking to that have an absolute sincere focus, not only on doing projects interstate, but potentially moving interstate, is crazy.
I mean, the debt burden that we've got in the state here in Victoria is going to be impacting generations, I think, to come, unfortunately. And I'm not really seeing how that is going to change, particularly when you've got we're forecasting high population growth, which requires housing, new supply to come to market. And really that represents about 60% of the Victorian state government's budget. So they kind of have they're kind of hamstrung between needing new housing, and in order to get the housing, they need to reduce the taxation, but to address the debt problem, they've got to have the tax. So they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place.
One thing that is fantastic about my experience of Victorian property industry is we are really resilient and we're very creative, and when push comes to shove, we stick together and we make things happen. And I saw that on several junctions within my career, my 15, 16 years in agency, when you think, gee, this is getting really tough. The industry will come together through great leadership, through people like Sam Tarasco at Salter, so many others that will speak up and have a voice and push for change. And I've got no doubt that we will get back there. The question, yes, the frustrating part is, well, sometimes so we will get back there, but why have we had to go through this in order to get back there? And you talk about build to rent at present, it had a really strong run. But now they're encountering some of their own problems when it comes to taxation and getting these projects sort of off the ground. So they're going to have to navigate their way through that. But ultimately, I think that a balanced approach to all types, all forms of residential accommodation can only be a positive.
Yeah. And so we spoke a bit about the terms of buying and selling developments. So
yeah.
What are some other things that you would suggest to developers, kind of opportunities within the current market cycle?
That's a good question. I think that they probably need to work on clearing the decks. So there's legacy projects, there's apartments, shops, offices as part of, I think that really we're sort of now virtually entering into a new turn the page moment.
A resetting of the pricing.
Total resetting of the pricing. I mean, You're talking now about, a project needing to achieve 15,000, 16,000 a metre just to come out of the ground.
Yeah.
And that's not even for, say, premium East Melbourne type stock.
Yeah.
And that'd probably be a fair bit more now. So I think that we've got to almost say, okay, we've got to clear the decks, move on from all of what wasn't. That might be a bit painful. They might not be reaping the profits that they'd hoped. And then just keep working towards what this new chapter looks like and adapting as an industry to where the opportunities sit at the moment. So whether that's more mixed use buildings, whether there's components of buildings that are build to rent, then other components are build to sell. There's a lot to play out in that space. Obviously, sectors like healthcare and childcare, I think some sectors of sort of 3.5 to 4-star hotel type accommodation. So I think where people have to be a little bit careful over the next 5 years is better may not be better, in the sense that it might be scaling back your finishes that make it more affordable, that help to serve that purpose's need, whether that's a tourist on a budget per night, whether that's a person who can only afford X dollars in rent per week, whether that's a person that can only afford to pay X for the apartment to buy. So I think it's matching the consumer demand with the actual product, as opposed to what we got into because of the boom run. Everything was about aspirational and awesome. Everything was just, it was like awesome on steroids. It was the best amenity and the best finishes and the best architects. And so I just think there's a bit of a changing of the guard moment that's occurring at the moment. And the smart ones will adapt, re-strengthen, and then start kicking again for the aspiration when the market allows for it. But unfortunately, as much as I'd like to think that we've gone through a lot of the pain, from what I can see, and even if we look at our primary business now, which is buying properties for ourselves and for our shareholders in the fund, the supply of good opportunities is coming in thick and fast. And the biggest catalyst for that is land tax. So the amount of people that have sacrificed for many years decades sometimes to build up a business that they then can afford to buy commercial property. And they might have bought 10 commercial properties over a 30-year period. And now they're getting their amalgamated bill for land tax. They've come through COVID. They're frustrated. They're paying all these extra taxes. And they're saying, what for? Why am I doing this? What's the point? So we've been approached by numerous groups through estate agents where it's sort of like they don't want to go to the market, but here are 8 properties. Tell us what you think they're worth and we'll have a conversation. So supply's picked up dramatically over the past 6 months and we've been going nearly 4 years now.
And so with the business, what are some of the problems that you solve for the marketplace and how do people engage with you and what types of issues, are the precursor to them getting in contact?
I'm not sure if we solve much for the marketplace. We've got an advisory business, Advise Transact, which is effectively a vendor side advisor. So an owner of a property may not wish to run the process themselves of divestment. So they'll come to myself, Lewis Tong, Ashley McIntyre, or Tony Raffanello, and we'll get the property ready for sale in terms of engaging with lawyers, town planners, architects. That's for development type properties. Or if it's a property that's got leases in place, we might go and talk to tenants about extending their lease before they go to the market. So trying to take any risk out of what could discount the property when it goes to market.
Right.
We try and de-risk it for the owner. Then we'll work with the estate agents, give them an opportunity to tell us why they might be best suited to handle that sale. And then we'll help the estate agent and report to the owners all the way through. So I think to an extent, without sounding like a smart ass, we're probably in the good books with a few estate agents at the moment because we've been very active in handing out listings, assignments. We've got JLL doing one in Alphington at the moment, a major site. And we've got Collier's doing a major site in St Kilda.
Yeah, I read about that one.
So I think that, if we're solving the problem of less commissions because of less transaction volume, then that might be one thing. On a serious note, within Advise Transact, we do a lot of pro bono work as well. So there has been a bent towards, obviously my background being of Jewish faith, there has been a bent to helping Jewish organisations. So whether it's religious organisations, and recently acted pro bono for a wonderful organisation, the National Jewish Women's Council of Australia, who have 3 programs in place to help women at different times of their life, most notably women that are struggling after pregnancy, birth. And it's not just for Jewish women. So it's a Jewish influenced group, but they help all women. And we got involved in that and reviewed their portfolio and helped them negotiate different things. And so we try and use the skills. Equally, we've helped the Leukemia Foundation. We'll help anyone. So I guess the property experience that we've got, we're happy to share that in that way. Other problems that we're solving, I'm not sure. Being cheeky, some developers might say you're solving our problem buying our ground floor retail that we haven't been able to lease for 24 months,
right?
Which then allows them to, often with these projects, Mike, they sell the apartments, they're left with the retail, and they can't shut the SPV down until everything's sold. So sometimes developers are really happy that we want to buy the ground floor in their projects because they don't want to lease them, and it allows them to sort of move on after we've settled. But I certainly don't think we're solving too many problems out there. I remain really passionate and my door's always open to young professionals, either in property or in business, that need some guidance. So I get a lot of people that contact me and want to have a chit chat, talk about their career, talk about a pathway in property and my journey and the journey of some of the stars that we had at CBRE who are now still stars. So I guess if I can help in that regard, solving people's career path problems, and that might be another way that I do give a bit of a hand.
Well, Mark, it was been awesome talking with you. I appreciate you coming and having a chat to us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for the opportunity. Take care.